My name is Tara Bennett. I'm 36 years old. And this is the story of how cancer didn't kill me, but betrayal almost did. 6 months ago, I thought I understood the definition of pain. The sharp sting of a needle, the dull ache in my bones from chemo, the slow nausea that rolled in like waves every morning. But nothing prepared me for the real agony, the kind that tears your heart from the inside out. The kind that comes from betrayal by the one person who promised to love you through everything. Logan Bennett, my husband of 9 years. My safe place. My forever. Or so I believed. When I was first diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer, Logan cried with me in the doctor's office. He held my hand, wiped away my tears, and told me that no matter what, we'd get through this together. I clung to that promise like a raft in a hurricane. He was my anchor, my light in the storm. And in the beginning, he showed up. Every appointment, every test, every sleepless night, he was there. But cancer has a way of peeling back the paint to reveal the rot underneath. And slowly, Logan started disappearing. He said work was demanding. He had to travel more. Longer hours, late-night meetings, missed calls, unanswered texts. I excused everyone. Told myself he was overwhelmed. That watching me deteriorate was just too much for him to bear. That men processed things differently. But there's a moment, a single, shattering moment, when denial dies. It was a Tuesday. I had just finished a brutal 3-hour chemo session. My body felt like paper soaked in water, barely holding its shape. I was sitting in the waiting room, pale and trembling, when I decided to check our bank account. Not for suspicion, just to make sure there was enough to cover the lab results due next week. What I saw made my blood run cold. 3 transactions. All recent. All massive. $248,500. $120,000. $89,000. All transferred to the same account, Rachel Monroe. Rachel. The health consultant Logan hired to support me. She was the smiling blonde who brewed calming teas, adjusted my pillows, and whispered affirmations like some kind of spiritual nursemaid. I thought she was kind. I thought she cared. I thought wrong. At first, I convinced myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe Logan was paying for some advanced wellness treatment plan. Maybe it was something for me. Maybe I just didn't understand. But deep down, I already knew. Because Logan's voice had started to change. The affection was mechanical. The warmth had turned lukewarm. He didn't kiss my forehead anymore before leaving in the mornings. He didn't ask how I felt after chemo. And lately, Rachel had started showing up at the house even when Logan wasn't around, or so I thought. One night, unable to sleep, I wandered into the kitchen for water. I froze in the dark hallway when I saw them through the open arch, Rachel sitting at our kitchen table, laughing softly. Logan was across from her, leaning in, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months. My fingers clutched the doorframe so tightly I thought they'd snap. I didn't confront them then. I wasn't ready. My body was weak, but my mind had begun to sharpen. Pain does that. It strips away illusions. And what I saw in that moment, what I heard in that laughter, was the sound of 2 people building a new life on the ashes of mine. The next morning, I searched our house while Logan was working downtown. Rachel had gone to buy more herbal supplements. I found papers. Receipts. Property agreements. And tucked behind an old tax folder in his locked desk drawer, I found something that made the air leave my lungs. A power of attorney document. If I became incapacitated, or died, Logan would gain full control over all our assets. Including the inheritance my mother had left me. The inheritance I hadn't touched. The one I was saving, just in case. I sat on the bedroom floor, the document in my lap, as tears streamed down my face. That's when the nausea stopped being about chemo. That's when survival took on a new meaning. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Emily, my younger sister. Not yet. I needed to be sure. I needed to see it all, everything, with my own eyes. Because if Logan and Rachel thought I was too weak to notice, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The days that followed became a silent war. I said nothing. I acted the part. Sick, grateful, tired. I let Rachel brew her teas and tuck me into blankets. I smiled faintly at Logan when he mumbled something about deadlines and networking events. I nodded when they spoke in hushed tones. I pretended not to notice when Rachel's perfume lingered in the bedroom longer than mine did. Inside, though, I was changing. Each moment they underestimated me, I grew stronger. I remembered something my mother once told me, back when I was a teenager, sobbing over my first heartbreak. When people show you who they really are, Tara, you don't fight them. You outlive them. Those words became my spine. One rainy afternoon, when Rachel was at a wellness seminar and Logan claimed to be at a real estate investment meeting, I finally made the call. Emily, I said into the phone, my voice surprisingly calm. I need you to drive me somewhere. And I need you not to ask why. She didn't hesitate. That's the kind of sister she is. 15 minutes later, I was in her car, wrapped in a scarf and oversized sweater, my bones aching from chemo but my pulse steady. I gave her the address. Aurora Lake Condos. A place Logan and I used to talk about in whispers, the kind of retirement dream people our age weren't supposed to think about yet. A someday dream. Apparently, someday came early, just not for me. We parked across the street, far enough to stay unnoticed but close enough to see. And just as I suspected, I saw them. Logan, wearing a shirt I hadn't seen in months, looking relaxed, boyish even. And Rachel, her hand looped through his arm like she was born to be there. They laughed. They kissed. And when he opened the car door for her, she slipped in like it was routine. My stomach turned. But I didn't cry. Instead, I pulled out my phone and snapped the clearest photo I could. Not for spite. Not for revenge. For evidence. Because I was no longer just the betrayed wife. I was building a case. Back at home, the house smelled like eucalyptus and ginger. Rachel's tea again. My eyes scanned the living room, the neatly fluffed pillows, the soft playlist in the background, the blanket on the couch. They were nesting. Preparing for life after me. That night, I stared at the ceiling for hours, letting rage turn to resolve. The next day, I called in a favor. My friend Jason, a cybersecurity analyst who owed me a debt from years ago, came over discreetly. I need surveillance, I told him. Just a camera. Small. Discreet. Something I can monitor from my phone. He didn't ask why. He installed it in the bookshelf, perfectly hidden, angled toward the kitchen and living room. It didn't take long. 2 nights later, while I lay asleep upstairs, I watched Logan pour wine for Rachel as she giggled, barefoot in my kitchen. They toasted. He kissed her neck. And then I watched, numb but alert, as Rachel said, once she signs, we'll be free. Sign what? That night, I waited until the house was quiet. I made my way into the study again, this time with gloves on. I turned on his laptop, entered the same password, my birthday, the same birthday he hadn't remembered this year, and opened his recent files. What I found made me sick. A full legal document, asset transfer and medical authorization. Masked as enrollment into a new cancer treatment center in Toronto. He even included a forged note from a fake doctor claiming it was urgent. He wasn't trying to save me. He was trying to erase me. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the dark with a blanket around my shoulders and wrote down a plan. I made a list of everything I'd need. Evidence. Legal support. Financial documents. Witnesses. Logan and Rachel weren't just cheating. They were plotting to steal my life, while I was still in it. And they had no idea that I was done playing the victim. The next morning, I dressed in the soft pink scarf my mother had given me before she died, the one I wore when I needed courage. I called my mother's old estate attorney. His name was Victor Langston, a man with a spine of steel and a reputation for burying people in court. We met privately at his office. I placed a folder on the table. Emails. Photos. Video clips from the camera. Screenshots of Logan's transactions to Rachel. The power of attorney draft. And the fraudulent treatment contract. He flipped through it slowly. Then looked at me, dead in the eye. "This is damning," he said. "If we act fast, I can have their accounts frozen and injunctions filed within 48 hours. Are you ready for what comes next?" I was ready the moment he kissed her in my kitchen. He nodded. "Then let's begin." That night, I sat in the living room, sipping herbal tea that Rachel had brewed with a smug smile. I smiled back. Because while she stirred honey into my cup, I was stirring the pot on a legal storm that would swallow them both whole. From that moment on, I became a shadow in my own house, but not a powerless one. I smiled when Rachel adjusted my blanket, thanked her when she offered those tasteless broths, nodded when Logan kissed my forehead and said, "You're so strong, babe. You've got this." I had to resist the urge to recoil every time he touched me. His lips, his voice, the hands that once felt like home, now all felt like poison wrapped in silk. I spent my days recovering from chemo and my nights preparing for war. Victor moved quickly. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was a tactician. Within 48 hours, we had filed an emergency injunction to freeze all accounts tied to Logan and Rachel, citing suspected financial abuse, fraud, and unauthorized asset transfer attempts. Victor also coordinated with my bank to issue a temporary hold on the inheritance account, which Logan had been circling like a vulture for weeks. The court needed one final trigger to grant a full freeze. And Logan, like clockwork, delivered it. 3 days after I saw the fake Toronto contract, Logan walked into my room with the folder in hand, acting like some benevolent savior. He sat by my bed and took a breath. "Tara, I've been researching treatments. There's this center in Toronto that's promising. New therapy. Higher success rate. Less pain." He reached for my hand. I didn't flinch. "I've already spoken to them. There's a spot, but we need to secure it immediately. All you have to do is sign the paperwork." He placed the folder on my lap gently, like it was a birthday gift. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I looked down at the documents, then back at him. "You really think this might work?" He nodded, squeezing my hand. "I believe in it. And I believe in you." I smiled softly. "Can I read it over in the morning? I'm a little foggy right now." "Of course," he said, brushing my cheek. "Just don't wait too long." When he left the room, I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for days. I slid the folder into my tote bag, called Victor, and said, "It's time." The next morning, while Logan thought I was resting, I was sitting in Victor's office. His legal assistant was already scanning the contract, flagging every clause that screamed fraud. "This is it," Victor said. "This confirms intent. I'm filing it with the judge today." That afternoon, while Logan was at work and Rachel was picking up essential oils, I quietly changed the locks to the house. A locksmith I hired from another city came and installed a brand new smart lock system. I even had the alarm codes reset. I removed their access like they had tried to remove me. Before I left, I placed a single sheet of paper on the dining table. Handwritten, in ink. "You thought I was too weak to fight. You forgot I was stronger than both of you combined." I walked out of that house without looking back. Emily opened her home to me without a question. Her guest room became my war room. My sanctuary. A place where I could monitor everything from the security camera still running in the living room of what used to be my home. It didn't take long. Logan came home later that evening and stood stunned on the porch when his key didn't work. He knocked for several minutes, then tried calling. I didn't answer. I simply watched him from the camera feed as he paced like a caged animal. Then he saw the note on the table. Once he got in, I assumed through the back window or a locksmith of his own, and his face fell. Within 24 hours, the real storm hit. His accounts? Frozen. His credit cards? Declined. His calls to the bank? Met with legal silence. Rachel? Panicked. She tried reaching out to me through a fake number first, texting something like "We need to talk, please. It's not what you think." I replied with just 2 words. Try court. The panic became public when Victor notified me that the Financial Crimes Division had officially picked up the case. With the evidence I had collected, transactions, recordings, the fake contract, and the video from my bookshelf camera, investigators now had enough to pursue criminal charges. Rachel vanished from social media. Her wellness consultant website was taken down within hours. But the feds already had her real address, the same condo at Aurora Lake where she and Logan had started their secret life. Logan's desperation peaked when he called Emily's house one evening. I recognized the number and picked up. Tara, please. Please. What are you doing? This is going too far. My voice was even. You think this is too far? You stole my inheritance. You brought your mistress into my home while I was fighting for my life. You tried to get me to sign my rights away, Logan. He went silent. Then, I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I made mistakes. Mistakes don't come with notarized contracts. Tara, I'm begging you. You should save your breath. Your lawyer will need it. I hung up. That night, I took a walk in Emily's garden under the stars. I hadn't cried in days. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I'd already shed every tear that betrayal could ever earn. I wasn't done yet. Not until I saw them both answer to the law they thought would never catch them. The first court hearing was scheduled within 2 weeks. A whirlwind of motions, document submissions, and statements consumed every day between. Victor was relentless. Every time Logan's lawyer tried to delay or negotiate outside of court, Victor responded with one simple line: "My client prefers the truth be heard in public." And so it would be. On the morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully. Not like a woman devastated by cancer. Not like a grieving wife. I wore a fitted black pantsuit, clean lines, no jewelry. My hair, still short from the chemo, framed my face like armor. Emily stood beside me, proud and silent. I caught my reflection in the courthouse elevator. I didn't see the Tara who once trembled in the waiting room after chemo. I saw a woman with nothing left to fear. Logan was already inside when I arrived. He looked smaller. Hollow. The weight of sleepless nights and unraveling lies had clearly started to show. Rachel sat beside him, avoiding my eyes. Her makeup was light, as if trying to make herself seem delicate, remorseful. It didn't work. When the judge entered, silence fell over the courtroom like a heavy curtain. Victor stood with calm confidence and presented our case. One by one, the pieces of betrayal fell into place. The bank transfers to Rachel's account. The surveillance footage from the hidden camera. The fraudulent medical documents and fake Toronto treatment center. The power of attorney Logan tried to slip past me. The recorded conversation of Rachel pressuring him to hurry up. The judge sat with a frown deepening as each exhibit was entered into the record. Logan's lawyer tried to argue mental strain, pressure from caregiving, emotional confusion. But nothing, not a single excuse, could explain forging documents and attempting to strip a sick woman of her legal autonomy. Then, the judge turned to me. "Mrs. Bennett," he said. "Do you have anything you wish to add before we adjourn for ruling?" I stood. "Yes, Your Honor." I do. The courtroom hushed as I stepped forward. I fought for my life while the man I loved tried to end the one I had left. I went through chemo thinking I had someone waiting for me at home. I believed in love. I believed in loyalty. What I got was a carefully planned betrayal. I paused, steadying my breath. Cancer didn't take everything from me. People did. But I decided not to let that destroy who I am. I may have been weak in body, but I refused to let that mean I was weak in spirit. I turned, letting my gaze land on Logan. I trusted you, Logan. And you used that trust to build a future with someone else, in my home, with my money, while I could barely lift my head off the pillow. You wanted me gone. But I'm still here. The judge's voice was low but firm as he concluded the session. I will deliver the ruling in 2 days. Until then, all financial holds and restraining orders remain in effect. As we left the courtroom, Rachel suddenly broke away from Logan's side. Tara, please. I didn't know he was lying to you. He told me you'd given up. He said you didn't want treatment anymore. I stopped, turned slowly, and looked at her. I used to think you were a caregiver, I said, cool and clear. Turns out you were just a gravedigger. But the grave wasn't mine. She froze. Logan reached for her, but she pulled away. Everything they built on lies was crumbling. And I still hadn't even pulled the final trigger. 2 days later, I stood again before the same judge. He didn't waste words. For organized deception, attempted financial exploitation, and attempted fraudulent transfer of power of attorney, this court finds the defendants, Logan Bennett and Rachel Monroe, jointly liable. The court grants permanent freezing of disputed assets, full restitution of all funds transferred without consent, and refers the matter to the district attorney for criminal charges. A gasp swept through the room. Rachel gripped Logan's arm, but his expression was blank. Pale. Almost frozen. Furthermore, the judge continued, a civil penalty for emotional and medical distress will be awarded to the plaintiff in the amount of $1.5 million. This case is closed. Victor leaned in and whispered, that's the hammer. But I wasn't smiling. Not yet. Because there was one more reckoning to come. Not in civil court, but in criminal. That same afternoon, as I sipped tea on Emily's porch, the call came from the district attorney's office. Ms. Bennett, we've reviewed the material submitted during your civil case. We're proceeding with charges for fraud, coercion, and conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse. We'd like you to testify. I nodded into the phone, even though they couldn't see me. I'll be there. I'm not done yet. Testifying in a criminal trial was never something I imagined I'd do. Certainly not against the man I once vowed to love in sickness and in health. But standing in that courtroom weeks later, I felt no fear, only clarity. I was no longer the woman clinging to survival, hoping the people around her would do right by her. I was the woman who had clawed her way back, and now held the truth like a blade. Logan and Rachel sat at the defense table, surrounded by legal counsel. They looked drained, sunken. The arrogance was gone. I could tell by the way Logan avoided my eyes, and the way Rachel's knee bounced under the table, nervously. This time, there would be no loopholes, no smooth talk, no manipulation. This wasn't civil court. This was the state versus Logan Bennett and Rachel Monroe. The prosecution laid out the case in brutal, chronological order. They spoke of my medical condition, my vulnerability, and the evidence of calculated deceit. They showed the forged contract Logan asked me to sign. They played the video of Rachel's cold whisper, just finish it, Logan. I don't want to keep pretending. The jury watched in tense silence. And when it was my turn to speak, I walked to the stand with slow, purposeful steps. The prosecutor asked her questions with grace, and I answered with composure. My voice didn't shake once. I trusted my husband to care for me, I said. Instead, he planned to strip me of everything I had left, not just my money, but my dignity, my name, my right to exist. I was at my weakest. And he counted on that. They both did. When the prosecutor asked how I discovered the truth, I detailed the camera. The emails. The documents. The moment I saw him with Rachel at the condo by Aurora Lake. They didn't just cheat. They plotted. Carefully. They watched me lose my hair, my appetite, my strength, and they used that as their window to steal my life. When cross-examined, Logan's attorney tried to undermine me. Isn't it true you were emotionally unstable during chemotherapy? Of course I was, I replied, but not unstable enough to miss $450,000 being funneled to a fake caregiver. Not unstable enough to miss that a man who once sat by my hospital bed now laughed behind my back with the woman he claimed was helping me heal. There were no more questions. The trial lasted 4 days. The defense tried to claim emotional confusion, financial mismanagement, even mutual miscommunication. But the evidence crushed every defense they attempted. On the final day, the courtroom was silent as the jury filed in. 12 faces, grave and focused. The judge asked the foreperson to rise. In the case of the state of Colorado versus Logan Bennett and Rachel Monroe, she said, we find both defendants guilty on all counts. Logan's shoulders slumped. Rachel let out a breathless sob. I stayed still, arms folded in my lap. The judge issued the sentence that followed. For conspiracy to commit fraud, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and attempted theft by deception, Logan Bennett, you are hereby sentenced to 3 years in state prison with no eligibility for parole. He didn't move. For Rachel Monroe, for willful participation and attempted beneficiary fraud, you are sentenced to 2 years in prison. Rachel cried openly, her mascara running down her face. I didn't look away. Because when they looked up, I wanted them to see the face of the woman they tried to erase. Still here. Still standing. After the trial, people began to whisper. Some were sympathetic. Others were shocked. But the people who mattered, the nurses who held my hand through chemo, the old friends who dropped off soup on stormy days, Emily, oh, Emily, wept with pride. You did it, she whispered as we stood on the courthouse steps. You didn't just survive, you won. I smiled faintly. It wasn't just about winning, Em. It was about making sure they never do it to anyone else. In the weeks that followed, reporters tried to reach out. One local station even called it one of the most cold-blooded domestic betrayals in recent years. But I gave no interviews. I didn't want to be a symbol. I didn't want pity. I wanted peace. The day Logan was taken to the correctional facility, I stood in my mother's garden, the place where she used to read to me when I was a child. I held the settlement check in one hand. Not just restitution, but the full $1.5 million in damages, plus control of all previously shared accounts. But this wasn't about the money. It was about the power that comes from no longer being controlled. And slowly, quietly, I started to rebuild. It's a strange thing, starting over after destruction. Everything looks the same, the roads, the shops, the trees that line the path to the park, but nothing feels the same. It's like your soul has been rewritten, and now you're watching the world through someone else's eyes. In my case, they were sharper, stronger, no longer fogged by blind trust or false love. I began with small things. Rearranging the guest room at Emily's house to feel more like a home. Cooking simple meals again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to feed myself. Reclaiming the routine that once kept me sane. And then, one afternoon, I visited the house. My house. Legally, it was mine again. Logan's name had been removed from the title, along with all joint financial claims. Thanks to the court's ruling, and the evidence of coercion, I had full ownership. When I stepped inside for the first time since that bitter day I changed the locks, the silence felt like a breath held too long. The air was still. Rachel's awful aromatherapy diffuser had been unplugged. The throw pillows she so obsessively arranged were gone. The photos of Logan and me, the ones I hadn't had the strength to take down, I boxed up one by one and left in the garage. Then I walked through every room. Room by room, I opened the windows, let the light in. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply reclaimed space. And when I reached the bedroom, our bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed myself to feel it all. The betrayal. The violation. The grief. And the fact that somehow, against every odd, I had won. Not just the court case. Not just the money. I had won myself back. A few weeks later, I received a call from the oncology center. My last round of scans had come in. Stable, the nurse said gently. No signs of progression. No new growths. We can move to routine monitoring. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So I just sat there, in the kitchen that had once echoed with lies and now stood in quiet relief, and whispered, "Thank you." I celebrated in the most ordinary way. I walked to the little cafe at the corner of Maple and 7th, the one Logan always said was too basic, and I bought myself a cinnamon scone and hot chamomile tea. I sat outside, watching people go by, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I didn't feel like a ghost in the crowd. I was alive. Not just physically. I was awake. In the weeks that followed, I cut my hair shorter, a bold, soft pixie. Not to hide the chemo, but to mark my rebirth. I joined a yoga studio. The slow stretches helped my body recover, but more than that, the stillness helped me breathe. There, in a quiet sunlit room surrounded by strangers, I found a small patch of peace. I even started writing again, something I hadn't done in years. Journaling, mostly. Pouring out all the thoughts I'd held in for too long. The fear. The rage. The guilt. The triumph. One night, I flipped to a blank page and wrote at the top. Letters to the woman I used to be. And with each sentence, I forgave her. Forgave her for loving blindly. Forgave her for staying too long. Forgave her for not seeing it sooner. Because she had survived. She had learned. And she had turned pain into power. By the time spring arrived, the court notified me that both Logan and Rachel had begun their sentences. Logan was serving time in a minimum security facility 2 states over. Rachel had been transferred to a women's correctional center after a failed plea bargain. Their world, the one they tried to build on top of my grave, had collapsed. And I never once visited. Because they no longer mattered. The only person I had left to face was me. And so I did. The morning I truly felt free, there were no headlines, no dramatic music, no tears. Just the quiet, golden hum of sunlight through the window and the soft sound of birds outside. I sat at my little kitchen table with a steaming cup of tea, not the herbal concoctions Rachel used to push, but my own homemade blend, and opened a blank notebook. For the first time in over a year, I wasn't thinking about survival. I wasn't thinking about Logan. Or Rachel. Or courtrooms. Or chemo. I was thinking about the woman who sat here now, whole again. Her name was Tara. And she had come back from the edge. I started volunteering once a week at the oncology ward. At first, I wasn't sure I could emotionally handle being back there, the sterile smell, the low beeping of machines, the tired eyes of patients wrapped in blankets, waiting. But what surprised me wasn't the sadness, it was the hope. The fierce, fragile hope that still clung to people even in the worst moments. I sat with women who were terrified like I had been. I held hands. I listened. And when someone asked, "How did you do it? How did you survive?" I smiled and said, "I stopped waiting for someone else to save me." By summer, I had moved back into the house permanently. But it didn't feel like the same house. I redecorated. Repainted. Stripped away every trace of the past. The photos on the walls were of mountains, lakes, and sunsets, symbols of peace, not people. I even turned Logan's old office into a reading nook filled with my mother's books and a single framed quote. "You don't have to burn the old house down. Just change the locks and start again." People began asking if I was going to date again. I told them I was dating myself, taking myself on walks, treating myself to dinner, giving myself the love I once begged for. I wasn't interested in filling the space Logan left behind. I was too busy building a life that didn't have space for people who needed me to be weak to love me. One crisp autumn morning, I visited my old tattoo parlor, the same one my mother took me to when I turned 18 and got my first tiny heart on my ankle. This time, I got something different. A single letter, B, etched in delicate script on the inside of my wrist. Not for Bennett. That name was gone, legally and emotionally. The B was for before. The woman I was before the pain, before the betrayal, before the sickness. The version of myself I had buried and just now unearthed. In the mirror, I studied the tattoo and smiled. It wasn't a wound. It was a scar turned signature. Life continued. Slowly. Beautifully. Emily and I grew closer than ever. We traveled once, just a short road trip along the coast, windows down, music blasting. At one stop, we watched the sun rise over a cliff and she turned to me and said, "You know, you didn't just survive them. You buried them." I laughed. Not bitterly. Not angrily. Just freely. And she was right. Because here's the truth. Logan and Rachel had tried to build their dream life using pieces of mine. They thought they could quietly shuffle me out of the picture, steal my money, my trust, my future. They thought the sickness had made me soft, blind, easy to break. But I was watching the whole time. And when the time was right, I flipped the script. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I gathered receipts, smiled through poison, and waited for the hammer to fall. Now, they were forgotten. Dust in my rearview mirror. And me? I wasn't just free. I was reborn. Tara's story isn't just about betrayal or revenge. It's about reclaiming your power when everyone counts you out. About turning pain into armor and silence into strategy. Sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply surviving with your soul intact and your name cleared. Because no matter how hard they try, the people who lie, cheat, and steal, they can never destroy a woman who rises. What would you do if someone tried to steal your life while you were at your lowest? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow Revenge Echoes, where the stories speak louder than revenge.